Hello. Hi, Fergus.
Yeah. Hello.
Fergus is our tech support for the session, so if anyone needs any help, reach out to him. All right, so we have arrived at a session that I'm personally really excited about. This is a rapid fire selection of really exciting short talk speakers in different areas of work, which is then followed by an opportunity to have a panel discussion and conversation with them. And so to get started, let me share my screen here. Okay, so first up on our lineup, we have Lexi Mairone from Humanity United and Dylan Mathews from Peace Direct. And they're talking about digital inclusion and funding. And then following this, we'll have Omar, just so you know, Bar, you're up next. And I will turn the time right over to you, Lexi and Dylan. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Julie, and welcome everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Dylan. I'm the Chief Executive of Peace Direct, and I'm going to be presenting with Lexi, who will introduce herself maybe now.
Sure thing. Thanks, Dylan. Hi, my name is Lexi Mairone from Humanity United. Excited to share a bit about the Digital Inclusion Fund. We only have 10 minutes, so I'll keep my intro short. Off you go, Dylan.
Great. Okay, so what we're going to share with you in the next 10 minutes is a little bit about our Digital Inclusion Fund, which Peace Direct and Humanity United collaborated on together. What we're going to cover is why we launched this fund, what the main characteristics of the fund were, who applied and received funding, what the impact of that fund was, and what we learned from it. So that's what we're going to try and do in the next 9 minutes. Okay, next slide, please, Lexi. So a little bit about the background to the fund. The first thing I should say is that both Peace Direct and Humanity United have a commitment to supporting local peace building efforts around the world and in shifting power and resources within the international peace building system to local actors. And so really, as COVID started to sweep the world last year, we held a global online consultation with the local activists, which attracted around 350 activists around the world. And we asked them the question, how was COVID likely to affect their work and what were they worried about? And it was a fantastic, fascinating 3-day consultation. And what came out of that, there were a lot of concerns raised by activists. And of course, the main one for us was that COVID would exacerbate existing inequalities and would deepen the digital divide. So these are local activists who were already living hand to mouth and were saying they were worried about whether or not they would be able to get through, not only just survive in terms of their own work, but also whether they could even adapt digitally, because they didn't have the resources, they didn't have access to the internet, and so they were very, very concerned. So we decided to set up a fund specifically for them. So in terms of the fund itself, we had a number of characteristics that we think were really geared towards getting money to organizations and individuals who wouldn't ordinarily have been able to access funding. First was that we developed a single, simple application form in 4 languages. So it's English, French, Spanish, and Arabic. We kept the questions brief, and we made sure that the application could be completed in a matter of minutes. So we weren't asking for exhaustive information. Second was that we asked for no supporting documentation. So unlike most funds like this, which ask for due diligence and various supporting documentation, we said we don't want any of that. We're going to take a trust-based approach. And I think we're quite innovative, particularly during COVID, where really, we recognize that we just wanted to make things as easy as possible for activists. We also encourage applications from individuals and non-registered organizations. So there was no barrier in someone accessing funding or applying to funding. We asked also for people to nominate a referee. So rather than any due diligence, we just said, tell us about someone who can vouch for your work within the community. And it was our responsibility to actually contact them and to do some due diligence. So in other words, we flipped the burden of responsibility onto us rather than on the applicant. And we looked into them and talked to people who knew them. And the application questions gave preference to underrepresented groups. So if you were a young woman or from a women's group, or you were in a rural area, you were given preference. And the grants that we were offering was a maximum of $750. So this was really for frontline grassroots activists. And we were trying to make decisions within 2 weeks of an application being received. Next, please, Lexi. So we thought we would get about 300-400 applicants. We knew that there was a demand for this because we'd already held the global consultation. We were completely overwhelmed. We had 2,000 applications received in around 5 months, most from sub-Saharan Africa, most submitted in English, and 61% by men. But we were really surprised at just the volume of applications. And what that said to us was that hunch that we had, local activists were really going to feel excluded from being able to participate online and shift their work online, was true. I mean, the applications were absolutely clear. They didn't have the money or the resources to buy either a laptop or just access the internet. And the need and the demand was really overwhelming. Lexi, over to you.
Great, thanks, Dylan. I'm going to switch now to talking about some of the fund's impact and recommendations and learnings for other organizations who might want to also support digital adaptation in a similar way. So after a review and scoring process of the 2,000 plus applications that were received, ultimately 233 grants were made, totaling $150,000, which Dylan said the maximum grant amount was $750, the average about 100 less than that. The vast majority of grant recipients put the grants toward IT equipment and internet access. Some also purchased software subscriptions, but mostly equipment and internet were the main concerns. The Peace Direct team was able to collect feedback and stories from the grant recipients a few months after the funds were received, to learn about how they were used and what kind of impact they had. And this process highlighted 7 main areas of impact of the fund. First, improving communication, adaptation, innovation, and improvement of existing work, reaching new audiences through broadcasts of various types, development of early warning and early response mechanisms, addressing sexual and gender-based violence, strengthening mental well-being of peace builders and their communities, and finally, strengthening organizational sustainability. And I want to share a few stories to give a little bit of color of what some of these look like. So first, there was one organization based in Nigeria who had been hosting a series of in-person trainings when COVID forced them to stop doing in-person trainings, and they were able to adapt to an online format, buying a subscription to Zoom and also purchasing internet data for all of the trainees so that they could continue joining without a resource barrier. The same organization also used this opportunity to conceptualize a new reporting tool using digital technology to track instances of police brutality in Nigeria. A different grant recipient in Liberia used the grant to purchase equipment to self-produce radio programs on gender-based violence, which had increased in their community during COVID-19, as it has in many of our communities. And they shared, this piece was really insightful. They shared that this also kept their staff safe, because previously they needed to record at a recording studio where they had to travel often at night. And this was dangerous for their female staff. So in addition to being able to have this recording equipment, they were also able to record from their homes and do it more safely. And the third story I want to share is an organization in northern Uganda that plays a role in supporting mediation of local conflicts. During COVID, their community saw a rise in the rates of violence and conflict, and the organization started receiving a much higher volume of calls requesting their help. And they found themselves running out of phone credit to receive and respond to these calls. So with the grant from the Digital Inclusion Fund, they were able to purchase additional phone credit, which enabled them to continue supporting mediators and respond to all the requests they were receiving. These stories are just a few of many, but they point to the outsized impact of a small amount of funds and what it can achieve for an organization that's ready to adapt to crisis and continue their work. And because of the success of the fund, we wanted to share some learnings and recommendations for others who'd be interested in doing something similar. We've just highlighted 4 here, so there are many more, and we'd be open to sharing some more of those maybe during the Q&A section. But first, one of the biggest learnings is that closing the digital divide should be a priority for all donors and INGOs working with local civil society. It should be included in their budgets or through dedicated technology grants. Next, organizations should consider how tech can support peace building through a broad range of approaches and not just improving communication. Third, there's an importance in supporting digital literacy programs to enable local civil society to try new tech-based peace building approaches and gain some fluency in using them. And finally, INGOs should adapt their partnership approaches by establishing preferential access criteria like the ones Dylan described to reach underrepresented groups. I'll stop there and pass the mic to the next panelist. I'm looking forward to engaging more of you folks.
Thank you so much, Lexi and Dylan. And just a note, if you didn't see in the chat, we're taking questions for all of the panelists after everyone has given their short talk. And so if you have questions, you can bookmark them by putting them in the chat or in the Q&A function. And next, we're really excited to welcome Omar Mccessie, who's coming to us from Danmission to talk about a human-centered design process. So here you go, Omar.
Hello, and thank you, everyone. So I'm sharing my screen. 1 second. Okay. Hello, everyone. So basically today I'm going to be talking about our project with building a dialogue. So let me just start by introducing myself. So I'm Omar Mccessie. I'm the project manager and data and tech lead at Danmission. I'm currently based in Beirut, and we're going to be talking more about the experience, how we actually built the project of building a dialogue with actually build up. So we actually implemented the same project in Southeast Asia, in MENA, and in East Africa, but my focus today is more on the MENA region. So in that mission, we focus on 3 main pillars, and one of the all the pillars actually. So we have pillar number 1 is actually theology for social action. Pillar number 2 is actually peace building and dialogue. The third pillar is actually a natural resources management, and we actually wanted to focus on our two main pillars. So we wanted actually to solve with the followers and solve with grassroots organizations challenges and problems related to interreligious dialogue that they think that can be addressed by digital technology. And we all understand that in the MENA region we lack interreligious dialogue somehow. We have a lot of problems that we have a lot of challenges in that, and with build up, hopefully we try to accelerate and to put into process a small project with multiple phases. I'm not going to go too deep into the process and the methodology because this is basically what we did with build up. So basically really fast, I'm going to go with it. So we start with the inception phase with a focus on outreach. We go and outreach actually in the MENA region. And our 3 main focus regions were Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq. And we started by actually outreaching, calling out people, calling out grassroots organizations, small challenges, small people that are willing to contribute into this solution, let's say. Then we go forward to the online innovation courses, then going forward with the design and strategy workshops, finally to the grant funding. And then we have the evaluation. And then we added actually at the end something really new, which is called the learn-a-thon, which I'm going to be explaining somehow at the end, how we move forward with that. So from that, we actually received more than 1,000 applications actually. But basically after a couple of filters, we have 300 participants from Lebanon and Syria and Iraq with a short period of time. We're talking around like 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So it was a need, and people were willing to contribute to that. And from that, we actually selected with a specific set of selection criteria, 60 projects that, you know, that they're willing to go forward with innovation courses, which we accelerated with build-up. Then we selected 3 teams, and then we have the evaluation workshop and the learn-a-thon. The focus of the design and the strategy workshop was, first of all, nonviolent communication, which is really essential for dialogue. Second one would be human-centered design. And I have to say, in my own opinion, because the project haven't finished yet, is actually finishing like after 1 month, and we have a couple of events happening for that. But we received tons of feedback from everyone that they loved human-centered design and they would like to replicate it elsewhere. They somehow got all the materials, everything they need to actually even teach it out to other organizations from all of this. And the last one would be monitoring, evaluation, and more the project lifecycle and how they would handle the project itself. So for that, as I said before, we actually picked three local initiatives, let's say. So one of them is in Iraq. It's called, and excuse me for not saying it right, it's called Satyagraha for Peace. And this is basically a social media monitoring and moderation method or a way. So this is the Satyagraha way of Gandhi on talking generally and building peace between people. So basically these people, they go online and they try to figure out how to talk better to each other, how to avoid conflict, and how more moderate the interaction to building it into dialogue more. And this got a bit, how do you say, it boomed on social media in Iraq, let's say. So we had a lot of people talking about religious disputes between, let's say, Muslims and Christians. And Satyagraha work, it happened really good in a way that at one point there was a speech online, there was a hate speech about Christians online. And actually a Muslim came there to actually correct that and to more formulate and build a dialogue that we shouldn't be hating each other, we should coexist. And that happened like between Muslims and Muslims himself talking about hate speech about Christians, let's say. So that's by itself is really great, and that's what we aim for actually at Danmission, building the dialogue itself. So yeah, and there is a lot of success stories from that. The next one is called Open Art Space, and that's actually in Syria. So basically they wanted to build like an interactive art spaces and visual storytelling using tablets, a couple of projectors, more technology tools for the people and for the youth to understand more, having better dialogue, having better coexistence and peace building between youth. So that's the second project that happened in Iraq. And the third one is from Al-Fayha Association. It's basically an online awareness session, a series of awareness sessions about celebratory gunfire. And that we are having a lot in Lebanon. So basically any event that happens, there is a lot of people that goes out and shoot guns, shoot missiles, whatever you want. So we're having a lot of interactive and online awareness sessions and dialogues about the topic. So yeah, these are the main 3 projects that we have. And what I wanted to actually share really fast today is basically the learning, the findings, and the successes that we have. Because really, like, they should be replicated, they should be redone again in a different way, maybe in an improved way. Again, as I said, that we already have like in 1 month still for 2 events that we have are the Learn-a-thon and the evaluation workshop. So the first one is not only that we need to focus on evaluating all the matters that happened, we're building a Learn-a-thon, which is like a package of what we learned and putting it on a couple of interactive online platforms. So we have, for example, Fabo, we have all of these platforms we can put online for interactive peace building and dialogue online. And we're trying to do that. And with the Learn-a-thon, hopefully, process that is going to go, we're going to enable the 3 projects to have better reach and more expand and connect together, because it's going to be basically like an online event in the Middle East. So hopefully we're going to have a lot of donors, we're going to have a lot of partners, we're going to have a lot of innovators in that sense, communicating with them. The 60 also participants that actually got selected to the innovation workshop, are now still a part of a network that we make use of. And now they're a reference, not only for Danmission, but also for Danmission's partners that we want to get use from. We want to help them, we want to support them, and they want to support their projects and initiatives in the region, so we can go back to that network and actually conduct the activities. The third one is actually never working alone, especially in innovation and technology, and that's basically an opinion that I have. A fourth one, that actually, because we're funding Build Up and the followers to do all of the work, with our constant monitoring and advisory position, let's say. But what I would have to say is that we need to provide autonomy for them, because basically they can do it by themselves. Another one would be the tools that are actually that are developed by these three projects. They're going to be replicated, they're going to be used in a different way. At Danmission, we have a lot of partners around the region. They're really long-term partners for more than hundreds of years. And these tools are actually really quite new. You know, we're not accustomed to use a lot of online tools and innovation tools. So we're going to make sure that we're going to be using that. And last thing, because we're expanding also in Danmission our portfolio in innovation and technology. So I would have to say again that working with Build Up and working on this project did enrich our portfolio of innovation, and it should be replicated in multiple ways. Hopefully, after the session, I will be able to also share a couple of resources. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Omar. I clapped out loud and was on mute and no one heard it. That was great. And we really look forward to, we have some questions bookmarked in the chat already, and also look forward to that continued discussion as well as some of those resources. Next up, we have Majid from the Pencil and Brush Academy. And we're excited to hear about her work with art. Go ahead, Majid.
Okay, thank you a lot. I'm just going to share my screen to start the presentation, and wanted to thank everyone for following up with me now. Actually, from speaking from the title, Art of Two Crises, I'm just going to start talking in a kind of storytelling way with Once Upon a Time. That when Pencil and Brush started at the beginning of the crisis of the Syrian conflict, we saw a lot of lack of spaces provided for children, or to be safe, to have a creative environment where they can share their thoughts. In addition to the having a lot of media effect in a way. At the time where we launched Pencil and Brush, when it was a safe space for children, where they can attend movies, or they can train to draw or film themselves to create media. A lot of one of the children used to say that the most things that they enjoyed was the cinema vibes when we used to show the movies, because they didn't even have TV at home. So it was an extraordinary experience for them to attend that. And with support, we at the first of 2009, we were able to conduct many workshops and cinema clubs for children in Syria, so they can what they feel and how's everything leaving an impact on them. But unfortunately, at the beginning of the pandemic, there was no place for any workshops or clubs. So we had to find a solution. Speaking here about the role of digital in the life of pandemic, we were thinking what was the channel, depending on the audience, the best channel. So we went to use Facebook, and here's the journey that I wanted to take you with me. I'm not going to speak a lot about statistics and numbers. I'm just going to tell you how we thought, the way of maybe depending on the previous session, the design thinking process. We followed the audience and what do they want. Basically, if we wanted to reach children without being there with them, we need their parents, and their parents on Facebook. So we decided to make a Facebook group. The Facebook group, we've started it with some articles related to art, how to use clay, how to do stop motion at home, trying to encourage mothers to help their children to use art and fight the pandemic and the Syrian crisis at once. But the thing is, we saw that we needed more interaction. This is to do elections on the Facebook group regarding some parenting skills or storytelling for children. But we faced an issue here because the internet connection didn't help us in Syria. A lot of them couldn't attend the live sessions or even the videos themselves because the internet didn't help to do that. So we started to think, how could we help them more to stay in contact and to transfer the space that we used to on ground to be on Facebook. So here's when we did to post the tips as static images rather than those live sessions, how to draw, how to transfer your idea. And then we started to see more interaction because the audience could, or the children now can connect with us more and build a relationship. So here's when we started to convert it to a novel, which started to challenges because it wasn't like not going to school or seeing any other children and what they're doing. So we started some group challenges on the Facebook group, where we asked them, for example, to continue from one shape to build a drawing from it. And each child would do that and share it on the Facebook group. And we saw a lot of interactions, like more than 50 children were there every day trying to participate in challenges that we offered. So after that, we followed it with a marathon. We did an art marathon with 10 days that they have to draw every day. And they give them challenges those 10 days. We had more than 500 participation using Facebook, and that was in a short time. Really something meaningful for us that parents are trying their best, and also children to participate with us. And children started to give them some comments and commenting from their parents' mobile phones, and that was a way of how the beneficiaries are using the channels that we are on, and we are trying to use that. A lot of children here in Syria don't have mobile phones that they can use by themselves. So basically, why did that work with us, and why was it an experience that we think used digital media for the benefit of our beneficiaries? To start with, we've made a focus group with, or phone calls with mothers whose children participated a lot during that period, and all of them said that they wanted to feel the community around them. Their children they woke up every day telling them that we're gonna do all our chores, just let us draw or participate in the challenge, because they wanted to see the reaction of people on their artwork, to see how other thinking about the same challenge that they are working on. So atmosphere, the light competition kind of environment where we were cheering for everyone and commenting for everyone. They were waiting for our comments to tell them that they did a great job and what they can do to make it better. And a lot of parents told us that their children weren't that interested in art, but when we did that challenge, after 10 days, they started even to improve their art without us into how to draw, just by giving them those challenges. So after that, we started to make a series of simple tools that they can use at home, because we don't have there's a lot of videos on YouTube for children on how to craft or how to draw, but a lot of tools used there is not available here in Syria. So we started to make for example, Ray is not the one here is not the same as the one on YouTube that is used. it needs different skills because it's not that big of a quality. This is why we started to make our own tutorials for children in their houses to try to use during the pandemic. Like it was a really inspiring period for us, trying to see how much impact we can do online. We really missed back then to direct contact with them, but we found a way through social media to leave that impact. So at the end, this is a photo that I really love for a kid that participated in one of our cinema club workshops that we do here in Syria. We were back at the end to the ground, and we started to make workshops again because the pandemic is like, we know how to deal with it, but the impact of social media and the experience that we wasn't left out behind. We are now working more on empowering the content of the digital content that we are working with. We are developing now a series of media literacy program for parents that was built on an interview made with kids on their view of how their parents are dealing with recent technology, looking at the gap that was built between both of them. This presentation at the end, we don't have a lot of data or experience to give you, rather than telling the story of how a platform helped us to reach children here, looking at the limitations of electricity and internet, and not being able to be directly with them. We hope that we left the impact that we wanted with the children out there, knowing that we lack a lot of opportunities and places that could help children to express themselves and be creative. And that's what we're trying to do till now. I hope that was any benefit for you guys, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Majid and everyone. As an update, we had, if you're following on the schedule, we had one more speaker scheduled, Prince Dixon, who is going to be talking about storytelling. Tech happens and he's not able to make it in. He's having a hotspot issue, but he's going to record his remarks, and so we'll share it later along with this group. But I just wanted to take a moment before we dive into some of the questions, which we do have several in the chat, to zoom out and say, I found this collection of talks quite interesting because we had from Lexi and Dylan remarks about funding these sort of digital adaptations. We had from Omar a real programmatic and institutional look at ways that an organization can help ongoing digital adaptations that live afterwards. And then we had from Majid like this very direct how we adapted and met the needs during this like very specific programming. So I'd love to just give each of you a minute or so, if you can, to just react and respond to each other's presentations before we dive into questions for each of you. Maybe we can go in order. So Lexi and Dylan first, and then go in our chronological order.
Thanks, Julie. Yeah, I'd be happy to kick off. I think what I'd like to say first is that, it's so inspiring to hear some of these stories, the sort of detail of the story, to really understand the impact it can have on groups, children, or communities. And I guess the question I have, and it's certainly born from our own experience of working on the Digital Inclusion Fund with Humanity United, is that there's so much creativity and ingenuity amongst communities and groups, even during COVID, to be able to adapt digitally. I'm just wondering whether, the stories that we hear are the exceptions, or whether or not you, in your own context, are seeing so many other organizations that really successfully adapted digitally. Because of course, we have our own experience that says, we had 2,000 applicants and we funded 233 projects. We're still trying to grapple with, to what extent are groups like yours able, and others in your context, able to successfully adapt digitally, or are there certain pieces of work as peace builders it is really just impossible to do without that face-to-face interaction? And we can see that there, and Lexi mentioned the 7 different areas of impact that we saw from our own work. So we know that it's more than just about increasing communication. There really was peace building and activities that could be conducted online. I'd be curious from many of my fellow panelists to understand, what do you see in your communities? Do you see that there's still limits to what we can do digitally, and that some of this stuff really needs to be done face to face?
Yeah, maybe I'll add a question that's coming up for me as we're talking about the theme of digital adaptations. And it's actually a question that we're holding at Humanity United with a lot of our partners who have also had to adapt a lot of their programming to the online space. And that's as we return to a safer environment to interact in person again, what strategically does the digital space offer that we can actually continue working kind of in the in-person and digital simultaneously, and kind of use the opportunities of each of those spaces to push work forward? So that's a question I'd have for the other panelists as well, as moving forward, how are you thinking? Is there a complementarity to be had between in-person work and work online, or is it ready to be in person and the digital was good for the time that it was needed? Yeah, those kinds of questions come up for me.
Yeah, can I start answering, or? Okay.
So before you answer those questions
Okay.
specifically, Majid, just take a moment to react to the other presentations and add any questions that you might have from them.
Yeah, okay, got it. Actually, for me, maybe I came late to the presentation, so I wasn't like ready to like take all the information that's presenting. So I know about the open art space projects that Omar mentioned in his when he spoke, but maybe it's something similar to what Lexi said. I found support from organizations that was directed to digitalization during the pandemic, especially here in Syria. But was it only to overcome something that we're not dealing with, or to reach something sustainable? Yeah, I actually think this is the same thing that I was thinking about, because how much is it how much are we to live with that? It was good, but was it good enough to let it be a routine or daily life? So basically, yeah, I think I can relate a lot to what she mentioned through her question.
Cool. That sounds great, actually. My only comment, and it's actually like my honest comment, that I love to see, experiences from the ground. And thank you, Majd, for highlighting the work that you're working on, actually. And from all of these presentations, I'm getting a lot of, not only comments, even private chats, that we need to assert networking, and we need to assert that we need to connect together and work together. And that's quite essential. And that's what is the goal of all of this that we're doing, really. Never working alone, that's really good. And I would have to say, yeah, it's really cool that, we're going to grassroots organization, a really small initiative, because they do make an impact. And thank you again for everyone presenting all of this. Really, thank you.
Perfect, thanks. Let's dive in, because there's lots of questions for everyone, and we want to have the chance to get to all of them. So starting with a question to you, Dylan and Lexi. Melissa is asking, and I'll just read it out loud for recording. First, this is incredible work and reminds me of the kind of informal funds I've seen communities of newly resettled refugees set up in neighborhoods in the US. I'm curious what kinds of applicants didn't get awarded funds and why, as well as those who you gave a very small amount to, like less than $100. And then just tagging onto that, how were decisions made? Not the methodology, but by whom?
I can give that a go, and then Lexi jump in if you would like to. So we had hoped to give a lot more grants than we could. We didn't expect only give 233 grants out of 2,000. That's partly because we didn't expect 2,000 applicants. We really wanted a higher success rate. In other words, if you applied, we hoped that you would get a reasonable chance of getting a grant. And originally, when we set the program up, the funding mechanism, we thought maybe 1 in 3 would get funding. We were just completely overwhelmed by the number of requests, and it became very, very clear very quickly that we wouldn't be able to do that. About 30% of the applications were actually completely ineligible, and by that I mean they weren't asking for digital tools. The fund was a digital inclusion fund, so we were saying you can buy tech equipment. We didn't just say computers or routers or access to internet. We said, if you want to buy stuff to create radio programs, etc. A lot of people were asking for medical equipment, for COVID masks, for hand sanitizer. And actually, I think there was a misunderstanding, I think, from some applicants that because we were launching a fund in the midst of COVID, it was there for a sort of health response. So automatically, we had quite a few people that we couldn't support. When a large number of, I think one of the failings of the fund was that we weren't able to support as many individuals. We said we wanted this to be open to individuals and organizations. With individuals, we asked for 2 references, more rather than just 1. And what we found, interestingly, was that most of the individual applications either only sent us 1 reference, or the references that they sent were members of their family. And however, we are basing this on trust, but we actually said that you have to give us someone who can vouch for your work, who's someone in your community who's not personally linked to you. So it's very difficult for us as an initiative trying to be as innovative and based on trust to actually say to some applicants, I'm sorry, but we can't fund you if your only referee is your brother, your sister, your mother, or your partner. So again, we tried to give us clear guidance, but still that didn't quite work out. In terms of the types of funding, let me just tell you one quick story of one of the groups that we funded, and it really, for me, reminds me of how important this kind of funding, finding ways of getting funding to local groups is and how important it is. One group based in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh, who are working with Rohingya refugees, asked us for $80. Now, for me, that was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Heartbreaking because there should be no organization out there that needs to jump through hoops to access $80, get access to the internet. That's what they wanted. They wanted to be able to access the internet for, I can't remember how many months, because they wanted to connect with other activists who were helping with the Rohingya refugee crisis. They could have asked for up to $750, they didn't. And for me, that really was a sign that the system isn't working for local activists. If they're needing to go, request that kind of money. But we had a few like that. As Lexi said, the majority of grants were at upper end, around $600, but we did have those under $100. And we were really proud as an initiative. We could say those were as important to us as anyone asking for $750. And the last point you asked, Julie, was who made those decisions? Now, at Peace Direct and with HU, we were talking about how can we sort of democratize the decision making. Actually, that was just too complicated to do. In other words, we didn't want the people to have the power to make the decisions about who gets funding. And in lots of our other types of programs, those decisions are made by the community. When we're talking about a global program, we're just trying to respond very, very quickly. It wasn't possible to have that kind of community decision-making approach, particularly because they were rapid response grants, very small amounts of money. But the reality was, it was just it was Peace Direct staff, board members that were reviewing applications every day over a 5-month period. And as I said, there were sort of two people reviewing each application. So it was by and large Peace Direct staff. We certainly wouldn't want to do that if we were having a longer term program in a particular country. For a global program, we wanted it to be quick and efficient, and that was the only way that we felt that it was possible to do that. Lexi, have I missed anything? No? Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, you're getting sign off. And I'm going to keep reading the questions from the chat, but if anyone here wants to just voice in your question, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll let you just come in and ask the question yourself. I want to move to a related question to you, Omar, who you were also giving grants, but in a different way. These weren't rapid response. This was a part of a larger program. And the question from Melissa here was how that money was raised and distributed, and how do you imagine those projects that were funded will be sustainable after fellowships?
Yeah, I actually replied privately to Melissa, but I'm happy actually to respond it to the group. So basically, we're partners with the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we have like continuous partnership and raise funds, especially when it comes to innovation. So with Build Up, actually, we built the project in the MENA region. Again, we had it also in Myanmar, Cambodia, Tanzania before. And we're always looking for an improved version elsewhere. And now we did it in the Middle East. And actually, it's gone really well that we want to actually expand it and expand the activities with the learnathon and all of these kind of stuff. She also asked about having the IP rights and all of this. So basically at Danmission, we also believe in open sourcing everything and making sure that you have the right to whatever you want to do, but we provide the tools and the resources that they want to build the platforms they want to build. So that's the one. Second thing, we believe in digital principles of development, which is building through by scaling, building with the user, building with all of these, more open source methodologies, let's say. So that's the second. We're also thinking about how we can accelerate them. We can provide them the tools with Build Up also that will sustain their businesses on a long run. Also expanding to more selected projects. It's not enough to only select 3 projects. We want to select even more and more in the region. So yeah, that's hopefully a continuous work. It's never ending, but we're trying to do as much as we can. Thank you.
Yeah, great, thanks. And if anyone has follow-ups, again, put those in the chat or raise your hand and you can come in and talk. Because we're kind of on a funding question roll, Majid, I want to ask you, for your adaptation that you made to like a quick response of making this available on Facebook, is that something that required extra funding for you? Or what did that shift look like in terms of financial resources?
Yeah. Due to the restrictions that we have here, we can't promote ads on Facebook. We only have organic using that platform or any other social media platform. So basically, when we want to build any social media campaign, we can relate on influencers or people that we can, or like any media sponsors who can share the content and help us to spread it out to the world. But regarding that, we try to invest the resources that we had in the program and to use our network, because we have we have previously assigned mothers with us in the project. So we had a list of order numbers. We sent a WhatsApp message to a group when we told them, like a podcast or something, that we told them that we launched this Facebook group, and we started to send some numbers and some participations to them to the WhatsApp every time in a while, so we can try to let them go back to book and try to join us. We also try to use some groups that we know that has a lot of interested mothers. This is why I think we reached it wasn't only Syrian people who joined us. We had some participation from Saudi Arabia, from Egypt, and from Palestine. Also people from Germany joined us, and especially working with mothers and children, they depend a lot on the work because they speak a lot in the daily morning talks, so they rather we were doing that during the pandemic, and what are you trying to do with your kids? So yeah, this is what we try to do. Like we try to, even like kids who are participating more with us, we try to highlight their participations with the posts, special posts on the Facebook page, where the mothers mostly are really proud of their children, so they try to follow up with them because her child would be put on the Facebook page. Try to use methods that are most likely approachable for and related to the audience that we're dealing with after studying their what do they do and how do they deal with the information presented for them.
That's really interesting and speaks to the question that you had gotten, which from Jenna, which was asking just how did you find these people? And I can relate as a mom who was looking for things for my kids to do during COVID, looking for any of those online resources. I want to zoom out to a question that Dylan asked to all of us, because the theme here I'm seeing is just this digital adaptations, some rapid, some on the ground, some in programming. And so I'm wondering if all of you can speak to this reflection on what you're seeing for what limits are, for what can be adapted and what needs to stay face-to-face, and where that line is.
I could start answering that. Okay. So basically, digitalization wasn't the solution of everything. So a lot of initiatives or companies or startups had to stop or had to change their whole business, trying to adapt to the situation. Especially people who their work depended on that, on being on the ground. And this is why actually, because we don't have as a country, we don't have enough financial resources to support people who are at home. This is why we tried to find other solutions that rather than staying at home to deal with the pandemic. And we had balance between economical situation and the health situation. So it wasn't we didn't rely a lot on digitalization or using digital tools. At the end, it wasn't the solution for everything. But was it reflected on other problems? Yes, a lot of people, for example, tried to added or I think felt the importance of being online. A lot of started on YouTube channel where they had their programs that they spread awareness that they didn't focus on before. But basically, we tried to adapt the solution, but it wasn't. It's still, especially here, we have problems of electricity and internet. So I know digitalization could be a solution, but you have to have some infrastructure to support that. So it was only a kind of relief for us until we figured out how to get there and how to deal with each other.
Thank you, Majid.
Yeah, if I can add to that, actually. So myself, I'm an advocate for digital transformation and technology in general. But what I would have to say that at Danmission, we actually work a lot with theologians, with people who spread a certain message. And usually we had an obstacle before that, these theologians, they're not completely online. They don't know what's technology and what is digital space, let's say. But I would have to say, from 1 year till now, I guess 1 year ago, we didn't know what's Zoom. Actually, it's 2 years. So yeah. So yeah, nobody before 2 years really knew what was Zoom and Teams and all of these kind of tools. They were somehow enforced on us. It was a challenge, and we bypassed that using Zoom and all of these kind of tools. And I would have to say also theologians right now in Lebanon, and around the region even, they're starting to adapt more and more technology. So that's the one. Second thing, technology is actually really a way to bypass a lot of obstacles happening in the region in MENA, weirdly, because, for example, I would say about Lebanon, we have a lot of road closures, we have all of these kind of challenges, and actually to overcome this is actually the digital way. We love conducting physical activities. We have physical activities, and we want to continue that. But sometimes it's just easier to do it online and to bypass a lot of challenges and hurdles that our followers are hearing on the ground, that they're confronting on day-to-day basis. Really, it's just a matter of actually doing both. Let's say I would have to say doing both at the same time when possible. Really, thank you.
Dylan, I know you asked this one, but Lexi or Dylan, do you have reflections on it?
I mean, I'll just name one of the other stories of an organization that received a grant from the Digital Inclusion Fund. Was like a youth sports organization that used sports to get youth to like engage physically in their bodies with one another, but also used it as a place to learn about like values and citizenship and things. And while they were able to adapt, basically just, we want to keep in touch with these kids. We want to keep in touch with their families during this time, but there wasn't really a way to fully adapt the like sports into the digital space. So there are just certain, I think it's just one example of the kind of thing that it can't be adapted and still have its like DNA of the really physical embodiment pieces. And that's part of the question I was asking around, like, yeah, really getting to the roots of the theories of change of these different programs to understand what can be adapted and what can. And I think we learned a bit of the kind of adaptations that people who received grants from the fund. Some were like, we did this adaptation and we're going to keep doing it because it was great. And some are like, we just needed something to stay in touch with these families, but we're going to go back as soon as we can.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think Lexi's absolutely right. I think we were really pleasantly surprised that a large number of grantees adapted in ways that they weren't convinced would work and did, and has offered them a new way of doing peace building. Whereas others, it was simply about, I mean, one of the impacts was that peace builders felt less isolated because they could connect with each other. And they felt extremely isolated during COVID. And so, you know, there's a spectrum of impacts, but some of the peace building is just not possible to do online. And so much of peace building is about trust building and that is really hard to do in a virtual setting. Thinking of sitting around a table, enjoying a meal with someone and trying to replicate that kind of interaction online. So there are limits, but I think that we are really encouraged by what we saw and the stories that people shared with us about the kind of work that could transition to being digital. And I wonder whether the COVID has accelerated that and has helped, I think, organizations think about that in much more creative ways than they would have done otherwise. I'm sure we would have got to it at some point, because that's the way the world is heading, right? But actually, COVID forced us to think, how can we do some of this differently? And I think what was inspiring for me was that actually doesn't also require a lot of money. We can do it, and we have to find ways of supporting more local groups to be able to do that.
Yeah, that story that you share about the $80 and, you know, applying for a grant to get that, it's really enlightening and illuminating, I think, to just what's possible with digital adaptations with relatively little resources, but still just the systems that require people to work for those little resources. I want to, this is a seed of a question that's not perfectly formed yet, so bear with me. We'll see how it grows out of my mouth. I'm interested in seeing how the tent of peace building has grown to be bigger by honoring or acknowledging like these, maybe a small peace building efforts instead of like the capital P peace building of maybe the more traditional programs that we think of, dialogue, etc. But here you have Majid who's doing art, Omar, one of your projects, the open art space. And so we see some programs like Omar's, the Satyagraha, which I'm also mispronouncing, which is direct dialogue for peace. It seems like it's hitting the nail on the head. And you have these other peripheral programs, which are obviously peace building, but don't have as clear of a line. I'm just wondering, with a new rapid response funding mechanism like this, and Majid with your programming, how you see that as being all part of one peace building movement and what we can do to further expand that tent. Was that understandable? Cool.
I'm happy to kick off. I think the answer there, Julie, for me, is that we have to stop predefining what peace is in communities. We've always felt at Peace Direct, and I know that Humanity United feel the same way, is that peace is so context specific, and building peace is so context specific. And I think, as you say, when you look at the history of peace building, we started off with a very, I think, global north, Western centric approach to what peace building was. It was something, if you look at the definitions of peace building, it was about something that happened after a conflict, sort of post-conflict sort of rehabilitation, reconstruction, trust building. And it was also about top-down approaches. It was very much a kind of elite-driven process, people shaking hands around a table and signing a piece of paper. Actually building peace, we understand so much more now. Fast forward 20, 30, 40 years, we know much more that peace, for it to be sustained, has to be locally owned, and it has to be locally driven, and it has to be contextually appropriate. So I suppose the answer is that we've got to stop thinking that peace means there's one definition of peace for everyone, or peace building. And actually peace building takes different forms. And I remember one particular initiative called the Everyday Peace Indicators Initiative, where they were asking communities, what does peace look like in your community? And one group in a Democratic Republic of Congo said, one indicator of peace being built in our community is when the dogs don't bark at night. And they said, when the dogs don't bark at night, we know that people aren't prowling around at night and we feel safer. And so even that indicator of peace shows that we've got to think more creatively about what peace means, how we measure peace, and also what peace building is. So the tent, I think, has always been large. Actually, I think range has always been broad. It's just the West or the global North haven't really acknowledged that. It's only now that I think the international community is starting to recognize that peace has 1,000 faces and 1,000 forms. And that's, I think, exciting for the movement if we were to talk about a peace movement.
I might add a thought to that, Julie. I'm thinking back to when we were writing up the criteria for the Digital Inclusion Fund, because we wanted it to be for peace builders, but recognizing that a lot of people in local civil society don't necessarily use that label foremost to describe the work they're doing in their community, even if we would say, you are building peace. So we went back and forth, and I think, I don't have it off the top of my head, but we ended up having a definition of peace building with like 4 or 5 bullet points, trying to get across that this is like an expansive term that includes a lot of different approaches, and shared that as part of the application to make sure folks knew, like, you do count, like you're part of what we see as peace building over here, even if that's a word that's not so familiar. And I think that language challenge can become a barrier because it is a word that is often imposed and it doesn't translate well into many languages. But yeah, I just remember that tricky piece of how do we create a definition that makes this feel accessible.
Yep, I wanted to add something to that. I feel like there's a theory in Syria that on the trendy words used by international organizations, that any trendy word, like, for example, social cohesion or peace, or like when we force those to the communities, we sometimes face rejection rather than acceptance, because they accept that those terms are being forced on them rather than being like planted from the community. So yeah, I see that supporting initiatives that may be not that big enough of speaking of peace and being that flag that says or spreading peace here, rather than focusing on different communities and with different methods and approaches, will give us actually different results and outcomes to what's related to peace. And yeah, I see that during our work. For example, when we make a cinema club, the cinema club is not for cinema. We discuss the topics of the movies and try to reflect them on our and how children deal with challenges they face. But when we publish it on social media, we say that we are doing a movie kind of session because a lot of people, we say that we make a discussion, but we don't speak a lot about, we don't focus a lot on it, rather than being entertaining kind of approach. Because people are tired of being told what to do, rather than having those concepts take from them, rather than us giving them those kind of mentalities. So yeah, I think speaking of small initiatives to spread peace is really more closer to the society.
Yeah, I would just add that you know the main goal is actually building dialogue and peace building. It's not the technology thing. Technology is more of a mainstreaming aspect here. For example, the project that we talked about, like Satyagraha something. Yeah, I keep mispronouncing it, but that project itself, like, it can be done like through AIs, through machine learning. We can use tons of tools that are really advanced, tons of algorithm and stuff like that. But ultimately, it's about peace building and dialogue. So whatever actually the project uses, it's actually the ultimate goal and the ultimate end that we want to go through is building a dialogue. That's the name of the project. Thank you.
Those are such great reflections from everyone. Thank you. And just like that, I looked at my clock and our time has zipped by. So we have about a minute left. If you have any just final reflections or final thoughts that you want to leave us with.
I'd like to just say, I think what this has reminded me of is, as I mentioned, I think earlier, the kind of real creativity and ingenuity that local groups have given the opportunity, and that in the rush or the frenzy to become a more digital community and a more digital society, we've got to make sure that that digital divide doesn't get wider. And it was the most important lesson from the fund. There is a real risk right now that the digital gap becomes wider and wider. The digital divide becomes wider, and that more and more people are left behind rather than being included in peace building or in the life of their community. So I think for me, the takeaway is, whatever we do and however we do it, let's try and make sure that we can close that digital divide. And even if it doesn't mean that we are transitioning or adapting the peace building work to the digital space, we look at ways in which others can have their voice heard in the digital space and they can participate in the digital space. And I think for me, we all have a role to play in that. As activists, as funders, as NGOs, think about how we can close the digital divide, because inequality has its many facets, and this is one of them. And I really think that we've all got to put our effort behind tackling that.
Anyone else have final? Yep.
Okay. Yep. Maybe I can briefly say that simplicity is like a really big key role player in our work building piece. Maybe a Facebook group or an art workshop may seems like something not that effective to some people or not with that big of an impact. But actually, when we look behind on the lives of the people who are benefiting from these projects, we see that they don't need that much of like a fund or equipment or tools. They only need like their voices to be heard and the small tools to be used to build that piece. So simplicity in implementing those projects is a really important thing to keep in mind. Actually, when I was preparing the presentation, I was going back to the Facebook group. We weren't like paying a lot of attention to it lately because we were so like working on other stuff. And that was like seeing all the artwork made by children, and it's like it made me feel like I want to get back to that because it's really impressive to see how a simple small thing could affect people's life.
Nothing from my side, but more of a thank you for everyone, really. And thank you for participating in all of this and for Build Up for giving us the opportunity into contributing into this conference. I just hope also later on, I'm going to be sharing with you a lot of resources that we can share, and hopefully we can reconnect. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much to all of you. If you haven't already, and if you're willing to put your contact info in the chat if people want to follow up with you. I couldn't add anything to those final thoughts from Dylan about as we're moving into the digital age further and further, as we're getting deeper and deeper, to keep aware of the areas of inequality, the digital divide being one of them, and to not exacerbate that and try to mitigate it instead. And to Majid's just, I think, really poignant reflection of don't discount the simple. Seeing kids sharing artwork is social cohesion, not to joke, Majd, but that scale is important. So thank you all again for your remarks. We'll post this recording for others who maybe didn't get all of it or want to catch it later and share. And have a great rest of your day. And we'll see you hopefully tomorrow for the final day of the Build Peace Conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. It was really nice participating in this conference.